Hey guys, it's Kingdom Orange 2 here, and welcome back to my channel. I'm re-uploading this video because I wanted to give you guys way more Sleeping Beauties to compare with one another. Now, similar to my newer videos, I will first start by recapping the fairy tale, comparing the various versions to it, and then end my video with my rankings. Also, feel free to tell me down below if there's any Sleeping Beauties you think that I've still missed. Alright, so now before we prick our fingers, let's get right into it. Quick disclaimer. There are 3 different popular versions of Sleeping Beauty, but since none of the franchises on this list reference the extended ending of Perrault or Bastille, I will only recap the Brothers Grimm version of the tale. However, a lot of movies or TV shows will often mix elements from different authors, like the age of the princess, whether the wise women are witches or fairies, or the princess's name. The fairy tale. The fairy tale opens with a christening being held for the king and queen's newborn daughter, Princess Rosamond. 13 fairies are invited and bestow gifts of beauty and song for the little princess, but before the 12th fairy can give the young girl her blessing, the christening is interrupted by an old 13th fairy. The 13th fairy, who's furious that she wasn't invited, curses the infant princess so that on her 15th birthday, she will prick her finger on a spindle of a spinning wheel and die. The 12th fairy then offers her gift, an attempt to reverse the 13th fairy's curse by having the princess fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. 15 years later, and while the king and queen are away, Rosamond wanders around the castle where she finds an old woman using a spinning wheel. The princess, who has never seen a spinning wheel before, asks the old lady if she can try it. Unfortunately though, Rosamond pricks her finger on the spindle and falls into a deep sleep. The 12th fairy then arrives at the castle and places everyone inside of it under a sleeping spell, and summons a forest of trees and thorns to spring up around the palace, shielding it from the rest of the outside world. 100 years later, a prince from a royal family is out hunting when he sees the castle out in the distance. An old man then tells the prince that inside lies a beautiful princess who has been laying there for years waiting for a king's son to come and awaken her. The prince is able to make it past the trees and thorns and enters the castle, where he finds Rosamond lying asleep in her bed. He places a kiss on the sleeping princess's lips and she awakens, as the fairy tale ends with Rosamond and the prince getting married in the castle's chapel. Charming. So in this movie, Sleeping Beauty along with Snow White and Cinderella first appear at the bakery requesting a cake be made for each of their upcoming weddings. When the baker asks them what's so special about the man they're marrying, the girls burst into song about how great he is and how he's each one of their trophy boys. Later though, when the girls return to the cake shop, they find out that they're all engaged to the exact same guy, and the prince is forced to go to a place called Fire Mountain and choose one of the princesses to propose to. However, once Prince Charming gets there, he decides to not propose to any of them and instead marries a girl named Lenore at the end of the film. Disney. The Walt Disney Animation Studios released their own version of Sleeping Beauty in 1959. In this movie, Sleeping Beauty is named Aurora, which is the same exact name given to Sleeping Beauty's daughter in Bastille's version of the fairy tale. Now, something I find very interesting about Disney's take on Sleeping Beauty is that in every version of the fairy tale, Sleeping Beauty isn't technically awakened by true love's kiss. In the Brothers Grimm version of the fairy tale, the prince does kiss the princess awake, but it was never a requirement from the fairy like it is in the Disney movie, if that makes sense. Yeah, honestly, this is just an example of a bit of sloppy storytelling from the Brothers Grimm, but I believe it was a smart change on Disney's part to do. Ever After High. So while Sleeping Beauty doesn't make an appearance in the Ever After High franchise, her role is played by her daughter, Briar Beauty. Briar initially starts the series as a royal, and aware that she will have to sleep for 100 years, often tries to live her life to the fullest. Briar enjoys throwing parties and somewhat engaging in dangerous activities like jumping out of a window. However, Briar begins to show signs of doubt in her destiny and ends up throwing the storybook of legends down the well to Wonderland. Eventually though, the gang is able to find it and Briar apologizes to everyone for her actions. Fairytale High. In the only episode ever produced of this show, Sleeping Beauty appears along with Snow White after getting attention from the Wicked Witch of the West, but the girls use this time to rehearse for the school's talent show. Now for some reason, Sleeping Beauty uses the exact same character model as Cinderella. I know that for later artwork, they give her a different hairstyle and face shape, but did nobody think this was going to look confusing when they first animated the series? Fairytale Police Department. In this episode of Fairytale Police Department, when the prince arrives at Sleeping Beauty's castle, he decides to turn around after an old woman shows him a picture of a hideous ogre. Worried that the story won't follow on the right track, the detectives begin investigating, where they find out that the dark fairy not only changed all of Sleeping Beauty's photos to make her appear hideous, but disguised herself as the old lady. Not wanting the detectives to ruin her evil plans, the dark fairy begins to attack Johnny, but he is saved by Wanda, who engages in a duel with the dark fairy, ending in Wanda transforming her into a horse. And the episode ends with the prince kissing Sleeping Beauty awake, setting the fairy tale back on track. Festival of Family Classics. In their version of Sleeping Beauty, when the king orders all the spinning wheels to be burned, Countess 26 begs her husband to leave her spinning wheel alone because it's a family heirloom, and they stow it in a tower that nobody ever uses. 20 years later, Sleeping Beauty is outside, telling her mother that she is looking for new books to read, and the queen mentions how there are plenty of books stowed up in the attic tower. Sleeping Beauty then goes up to the tower where she pricks her finger, and the story continues on as usual. However, one thing that is utterly bizarre about this episode is that the dark fairy gets kissed by the prince's squire, who tells her that she reminds him of his mother. This, for some reason, makes her so emotional that she sets the prince free and lets him continue on to save the princess. Yeah, honestly, I don't even really know what to think about this, but it happens, so there's that. Fractured fairy tales. In this short segment, the prince decides that instead of waking Sleeping Beauty, he turns her castle into a theme park called Sleeping Beautyland. The attraction becomes super successful, and word reaches the evil fairy, who wants a part of the profit. Eventually, though, the public begins losing interest in the theme park, and in the end, it's revealed that everybody has been lying. The prince isn't really a prince, the evil fairy isn't a fairy, and Sleeping Beauty admits that she hasn't even been asleep, but just wanted to see if she could make it in showbiz. Grimm's Fairytale Classics. In 1989, Grimm's Fairytale Classics created an episode based on Sleeping Beauty. One thing that's interesting about their version of the fairy tale is that it will mention small details in the story that aren't typically talked about, like how the evil fairy is upset that all of the other fairies received beautiful golden plates. It does contain a couple of changes though. For example, in this episode, Sleeping Beauty follows the sound of a harp and finds an old woman in the tower sitting on a spinning wheel. She begs the old lady to teach her the tune, but the old woman tells her she must finish her work first. In the process, she actually stabs the spindle into Sleeping Beauty's finger, causing her to sleep. Also, in the end, the witch gets turned into a bat because I guess that's what happens to you when you're evil. I don't know. Happily ever after. Fairy tales for every child. So in this version of Sleeping Beauty, the fairy tale takes place in Latin America. However, in all honesty, I would go as far as to say that this is probably the closest version to the Brothers Grimm Sleeping Beauty on this list. The episode follows almost exactly the same plot points as the original fairy tale, just with Hispanic character names or celebrations. Like, for example, the princess is named Rosita, and she celebrates her birthday with a quinceañera. But other than that, there's really not much I can point out, except maybe that there's this annoying side character named Poncho. Happily Never After. Sleeping Beauty makes an appearance in both the first Happily Ever After and its sequel. In the first movie, when Frida is playing around with the scales, it messes with the Sleeping Beauty story, so when the prince kisses her, he falls asleep as well. She also reappears in the second movie when the fairy godmother is looking for a wife for the king, but Sleeping Beauty fails the test by falling asleep during the interview process. Jetlag Productions. I thought for sure Sleeping Beauty would have way more bootleg mockbuster films, but I guess Jetlag Productions was the only studio who wanted to take a swing at it. Anyways, in this movie, Sleeping Beauty is named Felicity for some odd reason, even though that's not one of her names in any of the three versions of the fairy tale. Regardless though, I like how in this movie, her fairy godmother Primrose is actually watching Felicity and making sure she stays out of harm, but Felicity is able to sneak away after lulling Primrose to sleep. However, most of the changes in this film were still pretty dumb. Like, I didn't really care for how long it took the prince to get to Felicity, especially the scene where he has to battle an underground giant. Regal Academy. Similar to Ever After High, the role of Sleeping Beauty is played by Sleeping Beauty's grandchildren, Ambrosia and Adonis Beauty. In the episode The Sleepover, the twins decide to tour Regal Academy to see if they want to attend. They end up both enjoying their time so much that they decide to invite everyone to their grandmother's castle for a sleepover party. At the party, the Dark Fairy swoops in, but Sleeping Beauty tells the students that she invited the Dark Fairy to avoid having her place a curse on her grandchildren. However, it turns out that the Dark Fairy is secretly working with the Snow Queen, and she places an enchantment on the castle, trapping everyone inside of it. At the same time, Vicky and her crew also go around throwing sleeping potions on multiple students. Luckily though, Rose Cinderella and her friends are able to capture the Dark Fairy, and Ambrosia and Adonis use their true love's kiss magic to wake up the rest of the students. But even though the twins say that they'll start attending Regal Academy, I don't believe we actually see them in the rest of the series. Shrek. So Sleeping Beauty's first actual appearance is in Shrek 2, where she falls asleep on the red carpet. However, she has a more prominent and speaking role in Shrek the Third. She and the rest of the princesses are throwing Fiona a baby shower when Prince Charming and his minions stage a coup on Fiona's castle. The girls manage to escape but are led into a trap by Rapunzel and thrown into the dungeon. Luckily though, the princesses get into motion and are able to free themselves using their wits. Now, Sleeping Beauty in Shrek has narcolepsy, which causes her to fall asleep at inappropriate times. This also makes it difficult for her to keep up with conversations. Simsala Grimm. So this episode begins with Doc Rock and Yo-Yo trying to figure out why everyone in the castle is fast asleep. Their search leads to a caged owl who tells them that she is Bianca, or Sleeping Beauty's fairy godmother, and 100 years ago, Sleeping Beauty was cursed by a wicked fairy named Gargona, who also turned her into an owl. The duo are able to turn Bianca back into a fairy, and they take the prince over to Sleeping Beauty's castle. In the process though, they are confronted by Gargona, but are successfully able to push back the fairy and make it towards Sleeping Beauty's bedchambers. And the episode ends with the prince awakening and marrying Sleeping Beauty, while Gargona is turned into an owl herself. The Triplets. In the Triplets version of Sleeping Beauty, the three girls are given a time machine by the good fairy so that they don't have to wait 16 years for Sleeping Beauty to grow up. Fast forward, and the kingdom is throwing a trade show where the evil fairy disguises herself as an old woman and asks for volunteers to demonstrate her new sewing machine. Since everyone in this episode is an idiot, nobody stops Sleeping Beauty, and she pricks her finger on the sewing machine like the evil fairy's prophecy foretold. Not wanting to wait around 100 years, the Triplets place an ad in the newspaper requesting a bunch of princes to take turns kissing Sleeping Beauty in hopes that one of their kisses will wake her up. Unfortunately though, the Triplets are unsuccessful, but then they realize that Prince Charming hasn't had a chance. They go to his castle where the Dark Fairy tries to stop him, but they are able to trap the Dark Fairy in her own net and get him over to the princess, where he wakes her up with a kiss. So the last franchise we'll look at today is Wolves, Witches, and Giants. I feel like most of the time, Wolves, Witches, and Giants will change a lot of the story to fit into its short runtime, but honestly, they were pretty much able to tell the entire fairy tale in this episode. The only difference is, as per usual, they'll add a lot of modern jokes, like how the king and queen were grateful they had a microwave and a mortgage on their castle. Yeah, I kinda hate to end the comparisons like this, but genuinely, there isn't much more to say on this episode, other than that I really enjoyed it. Now it's time for the rankings. Number 16 is Wolves, Witches, and Giants. Her design is pretty ugly, which is usual for this show. She's also the first on this list of many Sleeping Beauties who don't talk or have very little lines in their movie. Number 15 is Fairytale Police Department. Her design is at least cute, but I can't say anything else about her because she doesn't say anything. Number 14 is Happily Never After. She's not really a character in either of the Happily Never After films, but I think her dress is pretty cute. Also, I think the only thing she ever says is, "That's me." Number 13 is Fractured Fairy Tales. I admire how much effort this Sleeping Beauty put into pretending to be asleep. She truly will make it far in Hollywood. Number 12 is The Triplets. Not only did this Sleeping Beauty have a horrible mom haircut, but she also had an annoying Valley Girl accent. Number 11 is Fairytale High. We know next to nothing about this Sleeping Beauty, and I find it ridiculous that the animators use the exact same model as Cinderella. Also, even though they tried to change her artwork later on, she's still kinda ugly. Number 10 is Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics. I like this small plot detail of how the princess is looking for someone to finish her song, but honestly, I don't have that much to say about the Sleeping Beauty. The dress she falls asleep in is kind of pretty though. Number 9 is Festival of Family Classics. In my mind, I really couldn't tell much of a difference between this Sleeping Beauty and the Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics one. However, I ranked her higher because I think her design is prettier, and I like how she's a bookworm who went to the tower to look for more to read. Number 8 is Simsala Grimm. She definitely is a beauty, who sleeps, and this one has a bit of a baby voice. Also, for some reason, the color of Sleeping Beauty's hair makes me uncomfortable. Like, does anybody else think this hair reminds them of tomato soup? Number 7 is charming. So the Sleeping Beauty in this movie is an exact copy of Disney's and also doesn't have that much of a personality in this film. The only good thing I can say about her though is that I found her to be way less annoying than Snow White and Cinderella. Number 6 is Happily Ever After, Fairy Tales for Every Child. If I'm being completely honest, I'm probably ranking her so high just because of her uniqueness. However, I did really like the small glimpses we got to see of her personality throughout the episode. Number 5 is Shrek. I think her design is very pretty, but I found her to be the most boring princess in this movie. It's almost like the writers didn't really know what distinct personality trait to give her. However, overall, she's much better than a lot of Sleeping Beauties on this list, and the fact that she has narcolepsy makes her very interesting. Number 4 is Jetlag Productions. Even though the fact that they named her Felicity is a bit nonsensical, I still think she's a great character. Felicity reminds me of a young Brooke Shields, who probably would have made a perfect live-action Sleeping Beauty. Felicity's design is very beautiful, but my only complaint is that she has a pattern of strangely talking to herself. Like, who says, "Wow, I've been 16 for one whole week now. It's time for me to do some things on my own." Number 3 is Regal Academy. Adonis and Ambrosia are beautiful names, and I like that Ambrosia has feelings for Hawk Snow White. I honestly wish this storyline would have been stretched a bit longer. It could have made for more interesting drama in the second season. My only complaint though is that I would have wanted them to have done a tad bit more with their character designs. Ambrosia looks too much like Odette from Swan Princess for me. Number 2 is Disney. People always give Disney crap because Sleeping Beauty is hardly in her own film, but honestly, I don't care. I think Aurora is absolutely stunning and has a wonderful singing voice. One of my favorite scenes from a Disney movie is when Aurora is walking up the stairs towards the spinning wheel. The music makes it so cool and creepy. Also, I feel like you find out how awesome Aurora's personality is in the movie Disney Princess Enchanted Tales, but I doubt most people have seen it. Number 1 is Ever After High. While I absolutely do not appreciate her attitude or the stunt she pulled in Throne Coming, I still really love Briar. Not only is she insanely gorgeous, but her design is genius. I don't know whose idea it was to make the layers of her dress look like rose petals, but it's so smart. Also, I like how Mattel made her a party girl. If you couldn't tell by my Snow White ranking, I just like a character who's a party girl. Briar really just has it all, the great design, the beauty, and the character development. If you liked this video today and want to see more content in the future, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will see you soon. Bye!